Frank Capra's Mr. Smith Goes to Washington follows Jimmy Stewart's wide-eyed Jefferson Smith, a young idealist, naive Washington outsider who's appointed to the Senate and wants to follow in his murdered father's footsteps in trying to make a positive change to the country. He's a dreamer and a great believer in the American dream, land of the free and home of the brave and all that, so much so that he literally gets hypnotized by the Capitol dome. He talks to his new colleagues and the press openly and innocently about himself and the values of the American way. Of course, eventually Smith is hit bluntly with the institutionalized and rampant corruption. He was only hired in the first place after his predecessor died because the political daddies needed someone low-key and dumb, an impressionable fellow who smiles, waves, and asks no questions. And though it does appear at first, Smith is in way over his head in a world he does not understand. To borrow from the film Sicario, he is in the land of wolves, and he's not a wolf. But it turns out, Smith is able to muster his strength and his belief in the flag to take on corruption and dishonesty. I was quite taken aback by the film. I expected a decent movie, given its reputation, but one that, given the time it was released, a film that is relatively simple and straightforward, and patriotic to its core. But Smith is a film that, in spite of being very comedic at times, feels like it was made in anger. It really goes in deep with the look at corruption and attacks the Senate, at least in the film, with venom and leaves very few survivors. It's surprising. I mean, this was made in the 30s. The tone of the film is one you might expect from anti-establishment and anti-government films made in post-Vietnam 1970s and 80s. Smith is a character you root for right from the off. At first you share many of the character's pity for his naivety and find it a bit funny. But when reality hits him, and hits him it does, when the Senate, the courts and the press are all turned against him and he still defiantly stands up to evil, you're just pushing him to thunder his way through the Senate. Most of the emotions the audience are supposed to be feeling are manifested in the character Saunders, assigned as a secretary to Smith to keep him busy and numb, but whose pity quickly turns to shame and then bold support of Smith. The most interesting character in the film is Senator Joseph Payne, who was once friends with Smith's father and who once also was young and full of vigor, with a burning desire to do good and make a change to the country. Now, however, he is a part of the corruption machine, one of the many clogs in the wheel, but the arrival of Smith speckles him with nostalgia of the old ways when his soul was pure, and you can see it eat away at him throughout the film, and he's eventually put to the test and forced to pick a side. Either redemption of his soul, but losing his office by standing up to the likes of Jim Taylor, who has the entire Congress under his thumb, or putting Smith to the wolves and destroying the only innocent man in the Senate, the man who represents the values he once held, the man who is the son of his good friend who was murdered for trying to uphold good. It's a terrific character and played superbly by Claude. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington was so effective it had to be denounced by Washington insiders. It's a brilliant story of good versus evil, one man versus the entire world. The screenplay skillfully mixes comedy with drama and characterization, and the performances are top-notch. The ending is a bit abrupt, but in hindsight it makes sense since what comes next is obvious. I give the film an 8 out of 10.